We're learning about blessings. We got into the second chapter, which has so many details and ideas back and forth, that at least I think the objective over here, besides of course knowing which blessings to make and so on, is to understand that this is not such a easy subject. Like, it's not one page of a book. Yeah, say this blessing and that blessing and be happy. Just thank God. No. It's really complicated. And it's going to get more complicated in the next chapters, not in understanding, but in the complexity of the types of blessings and the things we say blessings for and so on. So right now we are in chapter 2, by the end of the chapter basically, in Halacha Yud Aleph, in the law number 11. All types of doughs that are actually very soft, very liquidy, if you actually fry it with liquid, that would be oil, or you can fry in something else. You can even fry in milk, he's going to say later, whatever. You can fry it. If you fry it in oil, okay, you can say the blessing of bread when you eat this for bread. Just as you would say the blessing for bread for any other type of food that actually has bread. So over here we have suppose a pot with some kind of mixture that of course has to have grain. If it doesn't have grain, forget it, it's not a bread. And you have a pan and oil. And you throw this liquid into the pan and it becomes some kind of shape or whatever, and it gets fried. So all the frying thing and so on, that's called bread. If you're gonna eat it to basically fill your belly, I'm hungry, so this is what you eat. But if you eat it because you want to have pleasure, like a sweet thing, then the blessing becomes mezainos, not the blessing, the regular amoitzi blessing for the bread that God brings out bread from the earth. Rather, for these kinds of sweet things, like would be some fried cookies or something like that, then you would say mezainos, that God creates all kinds of sustenance. And if you eat it within the context of a meal that you already said hamoitzi, so you ate bread, you're eating bread, and somebody brings, I'll bring you the last fried cookies my mother made. Okay, you have to say mezainos, because this is not part of the food. This is something sweet you eat. Like, it's not part of the meal, that's what I meant. It's not part of the meal. It's something like, oh, let's try it. Maybe it's good, maybe it's not. And even if you actually filled your belly, you're satisfied with these things, forget it, it's just mezainos. And even if you eat such a big amount that people would put a whole meal out of this thing, no, it's still mezainos, because it's a sweet thing. People don't actually fix a meal on these things. You don't invite somebody to eat just cookies, fried cookies. No, there has to be something else, something more. I'll offer you chicken and this and that, and then the fried cookies. And the reason for all of this is because from the beginning, this mixture was really, really soft, like liquidy. And then you fried it in some liquid. Automatically, that's called not Torah's lechem. It doesn't have the laws of bread, according to all opinions, because we're talking about something sweet that usually you don't eat to fill your belly. So in this law, he spoke about two things. First of all, so to speak, fried bread that people would eat as bread. But I decided to fry it, and it's very soft. Okay, that's bread. That's called bread. And then we spoke about something that is not really bread. It's a sweet thing. I fry it. And even if you eat such a big amount, it doesn't really matter, because this is not bread. It's not called bread. Now, a very small amount of oil in a pan that you put so that the mixture doesn't get burned, that's not called frying. That's called baking. It's the same thing as baking. Even if the pan does have a little bit of oil, but it's still called baking. It's not called frying. Frying means like a lot of oil. That's frying. Okay, that's number 11. Let's go for 12. However, all of that in 11 was a very soft dough, like liquidy. But over here in 12, we're talking about a hard dough. like regular bread dough, that you can actually work on it with your hands, and you decided to fry it in a pan with oil or any other liquid, or for instance, fat. Some people used to use fat. I'm not talking about whether this is good or not for health. We don't care. You're frying with fat. So what about these things? So over here, again, you have something like whatever shape it has. It's hard. You can pick it with your hand and work it with your hand, and you throw it into a pan and you fry it. There is an opinion that says that the frying in a pan does not take out of the loss of bread. This is still called bread, even though you fried it. Why? Because the liquid in the pan is not so much, it's not swimming in oil, it's just a little bit of oil, and the dough was actually hard, and this is just like baking in an oven. Therefore, the blessing you say for this, when you eat a kazais, which would be 28 grams, is a moitzi. That's opinion number one. Again, I'll repeat just to make things clear. We're talking about hard dough that you can actually work with your hands, and you fry it in a pan, not with a lot of oil. That means, what do I mean, a lot of oil? Okay. There's one stage number one of oil is I just put very, very small oil just for the thing not to get burned. Really thin layer of oil. They even sell in the supermarkets, like you can spray oil. So you just do a little bit of oil, it doesn't get burned, and you put this thing on top of it. That's not called frying, basically. That's called baking. It does have a little bit of oil, yeah, but it's just a little bit. And the dough is really hard. It looks like bread. So you're baking. That's opinion number one. Forget it, this is bread. Opinion number two, there are those who argue with this, and they say that frying is just like cooking. So we're defining baking means in an oven, no liquid. Cooking means with a lot of liquid, like a soup. And then there's frying, like in the middle. What do we do with frying? So there is an opinion that says frying is not like cooking. The first one we brought. The second opinion says, no, frying is just like cooking. And this is the main opinion, as we will learn in a minute. Frying is just like cooking. But we didn't finish. However, if a person eats this thing, again, hard dough, and you fried it, and now you filled your belly with this, you're satisfied. So there's a question over here. We have a suffix, we have a doubt whether you actually ate and you're supposed to be making the blessing for the bread and so on, or not. There's a doubt over here. So the Alter Rebbe says, I'll jump the parenthesis and when we come back. The Alter Rebbe says you have to be strict and don't eat this thing except inside the context of a meal where you already made the blessing on real, regular bread, and then you eat this thing because it's doubtful, so to speak. In the parenthesis, the Alter Rebbe says something very interesting. Let's go back to the parenthesis. Even though, so again, what triggered the parenthesis? The Alter Rebbe said we have a suffix shel Torah. We have a doubt from the Torah whether this thing is bread or not. What are we talking about? Hard dough, and I fried it. Not with a lot of oil, with a little bit of oil. Not with just a layer, a little more than that. Again, you have like frying pan full of oil. You have a frying pan with just a layer of oil. And then you have a frying pan with oil. A little bit. Okay, this is what we're talking about right here. Not the full of oil, not just a layer, in the middle. Okay, somewhere in the middle. And you fried these thingies that you threw inside the oil. So the Alter Rebbe said the law is this is like cooking. It's like cooked dough. And we'll learn what's the bracha in a minute. Now, if a person ate a lot of this, and now you're full with this, you're really satisfied, so you should make Birchas Hamazon, the blessing after the foods. For Bnei Noach, we already explained this doesn't make any sense and so on, but the Alter Rebbe is explaining for the Jew, of course. So this is what triggered the parenthesis. I have a doubt whether I should make, for a Jew, whether I should make the blessing, the 4 blessings of the grace after the meals or not. There's a doubt over here whether this is called bread or not. So the Alter Rebbe explains, even in the parenthesis, even though the amount of blessings in the blessings after the food, after bread, it's a rabbinical thing, like the blessings after the food, after all, why do we have 4 blessings? Because our sages learn from different verses and so on, but this is not, the amount of blessings is not a biblical thing. It's a rabbinical thing. However, since Moshe Rabbeinu is the one that established the first blessing, and it's a blessing by itself, and it starts with Baruch and it finishes with Baruch. I'm not going to explain all this thing. It's a complex thing in the Gemara in Brachos. But since Moshe Rabbeinu made this first blessing, so you should be strict with this blessing as if it was a Torah blessing. What does that mean? In other words, here finishes the parenthesis, but in other words, the Alter Rebbe is saying something very interesting. Like, there's a category in mitzvahs, which is mitzvahs d'oraisa, biblical commandments. What's a biblical commandment? Eat matzah on the night of Pesach. For a Jew, eat matzah on the night of Pesach. Okay, so you go eat matzah. It's a biblical command. Then we can argue what's matzah, what's not matzah. That's a different thing. Eat matzah on the night of Pesach. Biblical command. Nobody doubts this. Then you have rabbinical commandments. For instance, Hanukkah, light candles in Hanukkah. Our sages say to light candles in Hanukkah. Okay, very nice. Where do you find Hanukkah in the Torah, in the text of the 5 books of Moses? Nowhere. There's no such a thing. Hanukkah happened afterwards. The Torah finishes, the 5 books of Moses finish when he passes away. There's a whole argument who wrote the last psukim, the last verses. Okay, very nice. But it finished. That's it. It doesn't continue with the story. There's other books. Hanukkah happened thousands of years later. So Hanukkah is a rabbinical thing, and that's the category it has. But then, over here, the Alter Rebbe is saying a third category, a third level. What's the third level? We do know, because the Talmud says, we do know that Moshe Rabbeinu established the first blessing of the grace after the meals. If you look in the Torah and you ask yourself, what's the text of the grace after the meals? The Torah doesn't say. The Torah just says in Pashas Eikev, you will eat, you will satiate yourself, and you will bless. Yeah, really, what do I say? Torah doesn't say. So how do we know what to say? Okay, comes in Moshe Rabbeinu, which is basically the transcriber or whatever of the Torah. He received it from God and he gave it to us and so on. And he says, you should say this text. Is that a biblical commandment? No. Is that a rabbinical commandment? No. So what is it? The Alter Rebbe says over here, look, Moshe Rabbeinu established this. You should be strict as if it was a biblical commandment. As if it was, that's what the Alter Rebbe says. If you have a doubt whether you should say this or not, you should be strict as if it was a biblical thing. But still, pay attention, the Alter Rebbe is not calling this text a biblical thing. No. Nobody says that. I'm sorry, nobody says that. But still, he doesn't want to call it a rabbinical thing. No. It's a Moshe Rabbeinu thing. I don't know. It's a thing from Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay, so you should be strict after the parentheses with this kind of food. Again, a hard dough. You fried it with some oil or liquid, whatever, fat or whatever you want. Don't eat it if it's not inside of a meal, because there's a doubt over there which bracha you should say for this. And even if it's full of something else, like it has a filling inside of it, it's not just dough, bread, cheese or something like that. If it's not going to be filled with fruits, in which case it becomes like a sweet thing, like a dessert, and it's not anymore bread, something else. But if you fill it with cheese, for instance, and then you fry it with cream, people call this pladin. I don't know who calls it like that, but it doesn't matter. Or for instance, you fill it with meat, and then you fry it with fat, chicken fat or something like that. That's what the people used to use in those times, 1700s, 1800s. Then there's a whole doubt over here which blessing you should say. So better not to eat this if it's not going to be in the context of a real bread meal. However, if a person fixes himself, herself, to eat these kinds of fried things, you should not say hamoitzi. You should not treat this as bread and then say birchas hamazon, the blessing after the meals, according to the last opinion we brought before. Again, there were two opinions. Frying, according to the first opinion, frying still remains being bread. Still, the thing still remains being bread, as long as the dough was hard. And the second opinion is, no. Frying is like cooking. Forget it. You lost the category of bread. It's not called bread anymore. That's the second opinion. The Alter Rebbe is going to play back and forth. First opinion, second opinion. First opinion, second opinion. So over here, again, we have a hard dough, fried. What should I do with this? According to the second opinion, this is not called bread. Because the second opinion says that frying is like cooking. So this is not called bread. Cooked dough, as we're going to learn, is not called bread. Which blessing should you say for this? That God creates all kinds of sustenance, and then the blessing after the food. All of this is if you're going to fry it. But if you're going to cook it in a pot, this is not called bread at all. This is not called bread, even according to the first opinion. What was the first opinion? First opinion was, if you fry, that's called bread. Still called bread, yeah, if you fry. But if you cook, forget it, that's not called bread. Like everybody agrees that cooking dough is not called bread. Whatever you did over there, it's not called bread. And you should say, so even though we didn't finish the law, it's a long law, but the idea is like this, up to now at least. The idea is like this. Hard dough, cooked, that's not called bread. Mezoinus is the bracha, is the blessing. That God creates all kinds of sustenance. What about fried dough? We have two opinions. One opinion says it's bread, one opinion says it's not bread. What should I do? So you should be careful and not eat this thing except in the context of a meal, because you're going to get into trouble. Which blessing should I say? That's what the Rebbe is holding right now. Now, this cooked dough, even if you fix yourself to eat this thing, and even if you have real big pieces, and they call it kneidalach. People do this actually in Pesach, kneidalach. If you do kneidalach, which is basically cooked dough, even if they're big, or kreplach, whatever, kreplach is another famous thing, but kreplach have something inside. Kneidalach doesn't have anything inside, and kreplach have something inside, like meat or whatever, cheese. So that's not called bread, because it's cooked. However, let's get more complicated. After cooking, you want to bake it. Now I'll bake it. I did the dough, like raw dough, ugly. You don't need this. And then you cooked it. And then you took it out of the pot, and then you baked it. Or you put it in a pan without liquid. Or, as we learned before, with a very thin layer of liquid, so it doesn't get burned. Then the loss of bread, so to speak, the definition of bread comes back to this thing. And this is called bread, complete bread. You baked it, but before you cooked it, yes. But since you baked it, comes back to be bread again. Even if you're talking about very small pieces, doesn't matter. This is called bread. And you say moitzi, that God gives out bread from the earth, whatever, and the blessing after the food. If you eat the correct amount, point that. Now, according to the first opinion, what was the first opinion? That frying is still part of making bread. If you fry it still remains being bread. How much more so if you fry it in a very small amount of liquid? Like, again, according to the first opinion, that frying is in a little bit of liquid. It's just like baking. The same thing happens over here. If you went back and you took this thing and now you fry it in a pan with a bit of liquid. So the truth is, I don't know exactly if this guy, first of all, cooked it and then baked it and then fried it. I don't know if he did this, or, which makes more sense, first of all, he cooked it and now he fried it. First, we were talking about a case, this makes more sense. We were talking about a case where he cooked it, the dough, and he baked it. Everybody agrees this is bread. Forget it. Now we're talking about a case that he cooked it and now he fried it. That means, according to the first opinion, that's called bread. Because the first opinion says frying is just bread. It's like bread. Therefore, all kinds of doughs that you fill with cheese, for instance, that people call kreplach, is a dough filled with something, cheese or meat or something like that you cook. We're not talking about something sweet. Important to note. We're not talking about sweet. We're talking about like salty foods, whatever. You fill it with cheese or with meal, with meal, yeah, and with meat. Meat. That you cook it. People cook this. In our countries, people do this. We're talking about Russia and so on. And then you fry it with cream. We're talking about cheese because otherwise you wouldn't be able to fry it. So you fill the dough with cheese, and now you, after cooking it, you decided to fry it with cream in a pan or even in a pot with a lot of cream. But in the case of a pot, the cream was not so much. There was more cheese than cream, so to speak. You should not eat this except within the context of a meal, because the first opinion would tell you this is called bread. This is real bread. The first opinion. The truth is that the second opinion is the main one. This is not called bread. However, you should be careful. There is an opinion and it's important, and you shouldn't forget it, so to speak. So again, a person took dough, hard dough, put cheese inside of it, cooked it with water or whatever, soup, and then took it out and put it in a pan with oil or with milk or with cream, something like that. That's called bread, according to the first opinion. And therefore, you should not eat this except within the context of a meal. That means with bread. First of all, make the blessing of a bread, real, regular, common bread, and then eat this thing. However, if you're going to put this thing, dough with cheese inside, in a pot with a lot of oil, that the thing is floating on the oil, or milk, then this is really cooking. This is not called frying. This is cooking. And then you should say the bracha bore minimum zoinois, that God creates all kinds of sustenance. Everybody agrees to this. And the same thing happens if you actually fried it in a pan or a pot with a lot of cream. This is called bishul. This is called cooking in water. It's the same thing. Even if you took out the cream afterwards, it doesn't matter. It's still called cooking. So again, we see different levels of amount of oil are going to render the thing bread or not bread. And again, the worst of it is we have two opinions. And it's not that we say, nah, the first opinion, forget it, who cares? No, wait a second. Even though Allah is like the second opinion, that frying is not does not render the thing bread. However, there's a first opinion which is very important to be careful with, and therefore eat this weird thing within the context of a meal with bread.